just for the record, when Zuckerberg did that, this is when Peter Thiel was young and virile, not when he was currently like a death wraith. I don't know if you've seen a recent video of him, but something has occurred with that gentleman, and he needs help.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Skippy and Doogles back in your mentals, people. Y'all ready for this? Stop right now, rate and review. Click that review, type it up. Get our rating going on, help people find the show. We really appreciate it. Please do that. As always, listener mail, skippydoogles@gmail.com. Hit it up. We really enjoy that. We got 3 topics for you today before we go into Inside the Trade, which is for premium listeners, skippydoogles.supercast.com. Premium listeners get access to us talking about stocks we're researching, thinking about, sometimes those that we've invested in, but it's good for y'all to hear about this. So skippydoogles.supercast.com. Inside the Trade comes at the end. But the 3 topics we're going to talk about before that are 1, stablecoins. This is the 3rd episode in a row we're talking about stablecoins. We're going to hit on that, then talk about Cloudflare, recent conversation with Cloudflare, and then discuss the returns of a couple venture funds, Collab Fund and YC specifically. Let's get into it. You want to kick it off with the stablecoin?
Yeah, you really ruined my week.
Yes.
Because Circle Internet Group was on my mind, right?
Yes.
And the stock price kept going up. And I was going, we talked about it. My feelings are well documented on the last episode. But I was going, I want to give this crowd every benefit of the doubt. And I want to try and say, like, what is this going to be? We talked about how if you're in a third world country, having access to the US dollar that is readily tradable and available could be a really positive thing for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I tried to run the best case scenario for a company like Circle, and I ended up horrified. Okay,
continue.
Currently, it says Circle Internet Group's total assets is like $60 billion, right?
Yeah, buku.
Because the stock price was going so crazy, and if you need a refresher, how they make money is they store all that money, and then they put it in like really safe reserves, and they make that spread. Higher interest rates, the better for a company like Circle, because it's not even really a company, it's kind of like a bank, et cetera, et cetera.
Can I pause you for a second there? If you want a refresher or maybe even just a first-time understanding of what stablecoins are and where Circle fits into that, our last episode, go listen to our last episode. We talk all about that. We go deep into it, but I'll let you continue. But since you spit that out, okay, go ahead.
So anything if we stick with this hypothesis of this is world-changing technology, even though it's just a spreadsheet, which we've had for hundreds of years.
You are such a negative Nelly.
It's a ledger. But if this is world-changing technology, I was running some numbers. I was like, okay, so let's say it has 10 trillion in assets or 100 trillion in assets. Like, I know these are crazy numbers. Let's say Circle USD becomes like the de facto virtual currency for the world, because everyone that's not the U.S. says, oh, I want some of those dollars over there. That way I can just bypass my government. This is great, right? So that's awesome. What if interest rates go really high? That's good for a company like Circle. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, you got 100 trillion in cash. You're making the tiniest spread. This is the best company in the world.
Boom.
Problem is, that's not resilient in any way. Actually, it's disastrous. Right now, there's only 2.5-ish trillion of U.S. currency in circulation, right? So if you got to a point where you're talking trillions, you're going to have a hard time storing that in safe assets everywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. I mean, that's absolutely.
Even if you figure out that problem, then interest rates fluctuate in crazy ways. Sometimes interest rates even go negative. So Doogles, bear with me for a second as we talk about the world's most successful company, Circle Internet Group, becoming the de facto currency for 3 billion people. And interest rates go negative. All of a sudden, they're losing $500 billion a year overnight. Do you know the ramifications of that? Like, this does not... Basically, I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt. Sorry, I just have to recap all my thoughts here.
Yeah.
I was trying to say this is going to be the most successful thing on earth. What I found is that only a central government can take the sort of risk that would be associated with being that successful. That's why a central government actually can print money and control interest rates. If you take that out of the central government's functions, you are just setting this up to fail. Can you imagine if 3 billion people on Earth effectively use the same currency exchange, and all of a sudden overnight the value of that gets cut in half because of destability in their business model?
It's a case, I'm not even going to talk about Circle specifically, but in general, something like this, you can stick on Circle. I just, as I mentioned before, know somebody that's a shareholder. I don't want to negate their futures. So I'm just going to talk about it generally, but it applies to Circle. In any case where you look at the most extreme circumstance, where you say, if this is wildly successful and that world can't exist, that's a problem. Usually, as a startup, you imagine you sell. You don't even just imagine it. You imagine it, then you sell the perfect scenario into the future, and investors buy into that perfect scenario, knowing that the perfection won't occur, but who knows? You might pivot, you get less than, whatever it might be. Here is a circumstance where the perfect scenario in the future can't happen. It is impossible for it to actually exist. And that's kind of wild. You have to believe that you are going to be a pivotal part of an industry that's going to do something different than today, but you're just a milestone. You are not the end game. That's kind of what you have to believe, because the end game can't exist. The cost of success here is too high.
Let me make sure I follow that. So when Zuckerberg walked into Peter Thiel's office at some point and said, I'm going to have 2 billion people on my platform. Now he just has 3 billion. But you could run that out and say, yeah, the business still works, and probably works really well if you have half of the world using it. In the case of Circle, what I'm saying is the business model doesn't work at all. Probably when you get to, I don't know, 500 billion in assets, if you ever even get there.
Precisely. And just for the record, when Zuckerberg did that, this is when Peter Thiel was young and virile, not when he was currently like a death wraith. I don't know if you've seen a recent video of him, but something has occurred with that gentleman and he needs help. So just a little shout out. That was back in those days. No, that's exactly the case. You could sell that. You could say everyone on the planet is now on Facebook, and it is the default address book, which is probably closer to at the start, like what Facebook was back then, right? Default address book you go, okay, I can see that. Here you're like, we're the only currency that exists, and we are basing everything upon keeping interest rates at least stable and not going down. You go, can we turn back to the last slide? Because I don't want to see that slide. The success slide is a problem.
I'm just here to, in a way, I never thought I'd do this, praise central banks, because a central bank can actually say, we're going to lose 500 billion annually. It's all paper money anyway, because it's best for our country, our government, our society, our stability. A business cannot say that. And a business does not control that either. So it's completely out of their control. Like, we can move on. The Genius Act is so interesting here because of that mandate for a one-to-one currency reserve.
Exactly.
That it really just hamstrung this company, and in a good way, because you'd hate for someone like Circle to only have 97% of their money in safe assets, right? That wouldn't work.
So here's what I'm going to say. SkippyDoogles@gmail.com. There's a reason why we are wrong. There's a reason why we're wrong. If you know what that is, have a view on what that is, please send it our way, because we want to know. I don't see it, but there's a reason we're wrong. I got to believe it. Want to go to the next topic? Reaching that fishbowl?
Let's go to the next, mind-blowing thing that happened this week. Now, I don't know much about Cloudflare, the company. Do you know? I mean, I'm generally familiar.
I know some. Not a lot. I mean, I know what they do, but
I've been told behind the scenes it handles somewhat 20% of global internet traffic.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Now, the CEO gave an interview this week, and it was clever questioning that led into here's a big product announcement we're coming. So I work with PR firms. I know how this works. I'll take it with a grain of salt. But what he said, the facts he provided, are just so fascinating, Doogles. I know you haven't got to this yet. That's better, because I want your real-time reaction. All right. 10 years ago, Google would crawl your website, whatever it is, your business, your blog, whatever.
Yep.
This thing where you're creating content that goes out into the ether. They'd look at 2 pages for every visitor that they sent your way. Yeah, so if you had 10 pages, they might crawl all those 10 pages, and in return, they'd send you 5 visitors. And there's like this, that's the business of the internet, right? You put out good content, and someone like Google, in return for having access to that, sends people your way.
All right. I like it.
What happened 6 months ago is Google only sent one visit. For every 6 pages they looked at, they'd only send one visitor your way because more searchers are getting the information on the page and they don't have to click through to go somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like less. Yep.
Today it's 18-1.
Whoa.
18-1.
Really? I mean, I guess it's not directionally surprising, but that's a lot less.
A lot less. That's for Google. 6 months ago, OpenAI would look at 250 pages for one visitor, and Anthropic would look at 6,000 pages for one visitor.
Wow.
Today's numbers for those AI companies are 1,500 to 1 for OpenAI. So again, they look at 1,500 websites, send one visitor your way, and 60,000 to 1 for Anthropic.
Wow.
Okay, what this means, according to the Cloudflare CEO's hypothesis, because he is in the doom and gloom camp that says, this changes the internet. There's no reason for people to create content anymore because the artificial intelligence is just stealing all your ideas. They're not sending you traffic that you can monetize. They're also not sending you like traffic that you can build expertise on and become celebrity or an expert in the field.
That sounds like a dumb. It sounds like a dumb take. Sounds like a dumb take, but I understand. Okay, keep going.
I'll let you have your take, but those numbers are insane, right?
Those numbers
are literally insane. I can understand 10 years ago where you're like, hey, how many businesses do you see do this? We need awareness about our product. We need to build our expertise. We're starting a blog. We're starting a podcast. We're doing all these other things. And the inherent promise in that is Google's going to send more people our way. They're going to become aware of our product. They're going to buy our product. If that doesn't exist anymore, or it's 9 times less effective.
No. Yeah, fully. I get that. The facts. Let's agree on the facts. Boom. Okay. That's fascinating and is mind-blowing to me, those numbers. Directionally, again, makes sense, but the order of magnitude is wild, especially the 6 month to today. That shift is wild. The assumption, for me, what I believe, the assumption that you have to make if you want to go to the take that the Cloudflare CEO has, which one, it's always talk your book. I know there's some talk your book in here.
It's 100% talk your book. He's trying to sell a product. I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Exactly. The assumption you have to make is that everything like architecture, behaviors, etc., are going to stay the same. And now you have this different set of facts. And so therefore, when the case with technologies like this is that everything changes, like the assumptions you used to make go away. This might be a terrible analogy, I just came up with it, so bear with it. But to me, it sounds like, a bunch of people are writing novels now. So like, why do you have to create a website? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like, because you have basically AI, these AI tools you're talking about, they're taking a bunch of content and then they are using prior made content, including that content, to come up with new content, right? Summarize it, whatever it is. So the reason I say novel, I'm saying like books in general, is because so what humans did historically, still do, what humans would do is they consume a bunch of information and then at a lower scale, they create other information. Let's call it a novel. Now, because that human did that, you don't have to create content. Like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like at some point, it's become so incestuous that effectively you're just recycling a whole bunch of nonsense and content creation will change. Content creation will change. That does not mean that you don't create content. It's just that maybe the website as we knew it before shifts or whatever the media might be. But the quality goes down as time goes on. Go ahead. Fight me.
Are you saying that like your history novel written in 1850 about the town, that the author went around and interviewed 100 people from the town and then wrote that all into a novel? And the Cloudflare CEO is going, there's no reason for people to talk anymore because the novelist is stealing all their ideas. And so people are going to stop talking.
Basically, yeah. Do you read, you probably, I think you did at the time, because I think I sent this over to you. Sometime in the past couple years, someone put out a blog post that I read, and they collected all of the articles over the past 100 years. That is every piece of technology that came out, all the doom and gloom that came out around
100%, yeah.
It is just like that. Like that's what happened. Like the scenario that you just mentioned is probably real of what occurred. So like now we have the town crier So all like ancestors are going to perish tomorrow because we don't need your news anymore. Like this is what humans do. But no, things just shift. You get used to the new technology. Content creation will just change. The mediums might change. The style might change. How much and how you create content might change. But it doesn't mean you don't have to create content because AI needs your content.
So the disconnect, I agree with everything you said. I think this is a fascinating thought experiment more than anything else. The Cloudflare CEO will tell you he's working with like folks at Spotify to try and make sure that the content creators actually see some value. I don't
of course
have a problem with that. I mean, I think, to use a bad analogy, like this just might be the Napster moment where all the content is available for free to anyone that wants it, any AI that wants it. And there probably needs to be like more safekeeping of that. So the true experts, the people that actually add value.
Agree. Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but you get me all wild and child over here. I don't know what the Talk Your Book is because I didn't listen to this. But what I'd imagine is if someone says something like that, and you are the CEO of a company, what I'd imagine you're doing is saying, look at all this doom and gloom, and I'm your savior. So we are, Cloudflare's effect, this is not an accurate description, but it's directly accurate. They are the pipes for the internet, for a bunch of the internet. And so they're saying, we see all this stuff, just like Comcast used to do. We see all the stuff that comes through our pipes. We can see the future, and the future means content creation as it exists today will not exist in the future. But because we see the future and we see everything coming through, if you work with us, you can create better content. Like I assume it's some version of that, but tell me if I'm wrong.
Sometimes it's too easy, right? We've been around we're too old. So at the end of the month, they're hosting some event in New York with like all the major publishers. It alluded to maybe places like New York Times, and they're going to hit this red button and they're going to turn off AI's ability to comb their website, according to this dude. I think that's hilarious. It sounds like, we went through the journalism firewall stuff, and there were stops and starts there, and I still don't really think people have figured it out. It sounds like we're going to do the firewall behind the scenes game, which will probably just mean the random commenter that knows nothing on Reddit becomes more valuable for your perplexities of the world, which I don't know if that's a good thing.
Oh, my God. That's painful.
Seriously,
that's painful. Yeah,
this is 15 minutes long, and I know it's tough to carve out 15 minutes, but like the whole talk is just interesting. It's just really interesting.
And I don't mean to talk negatively. This is a CEO. You got to do your thing. So I'm not talking negatively about the Cloudflare person at all with my take. But I agree with you that it's an interesting time in general. And I don't even mean today. I would say if you go back 2 years, whenever, was it 2.5 years ago, when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, something like that. From that time to, I'd say, 3 years from now, like that 5-year period, will, I think, in a number of ways be similar. Nothing's ever the same, but be similar to the time that was like 1998 to 2003-ish, in that period of time, where you went from the time where like Amazon launched. I'm not getting the years exactly right, but like Amazon launched and people were like, I'm not putting my credit card on the internet. That's ridiculous. Oh, everything's available on the internet. Now we need like paywalls or whatever. So by the end of it, people are creating their own content. Like by the end of that, you start to have YouTube that launches and Facebook comes out of it. And like we are in some kind of a period like that where things will just look different on the other side. And I think it's fascinating. And especially, I mean, what you can say is someone like the Cloudflare CEO has to have access to so much information and insight, whether or not that comes through in this 15-minute talk, which is probably more promotional than anything else, than insight-driven. But that person...
No, he has data I've never seen. Like, they have an incredible amount of really precise data. I trust his numbers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's talk about Amazon a little bit. It's a side tangent.
Okay.
I have younger kids, right? And Amazon is 30 years into the game in the U.S. and dominant. Yeah. Amazon is every bit Walmart, and no one thought that was possible 30 years ago. And as U.S. citizens in metropolitan areas, like Amazon is such a part of life that you almost forget what it's like without it. During our time in Spain, Amazon basically does not exist. Certainly there's not trucks driving around dropping off junk at everyone's door. The ramifications of this, Doogles, are mind-blowingly fascinating and have effects that I had forgotten about. My 7-year-old went into a Toys R Us, a legit Toys R Us.
When was this?
2 weeks ago.
They still exist?
Only in Spain. They're like, okay,
Okay.
Amazon killed Toys R Us. Amazon killed
Yeah.
1,000 other small businesses.
Absolutely.
This is my 7-year-old's favorite store in the entire world. And it's just like the Toys R Us we were used to 30 years ago. But
I love that place.
You don't even think about the fact that Amazon took that away from our children. And it took so many other things away. I'm not saying this is good or bad, but the ramifications of, I can tell you 100 other examples. I won't bore people with it. All these little shops, like there was a little electronics shop half a block away from my flat, and it just had it was like an old Radio Shack. Like that doesn't exist in the States anymore. There were so many things like that were an incredibly pleasant experience that you didn't even see because it happened over 30 years. Like you didn't even see that change life. Like life is just different because of Amazon's dominance in a way that is hard to understand.
It is. I also, I can, there's no A/B test for life, so I can't say this for sure, but I feel strongly about this. I think if Amazon had existed as I was growing up, and there wasn't specifically, because you mentioned it, Radio Shack, my interest in electronics would be so much lower than it is today.
This is exactly the point.
I would go into Radio Shack and just I would go in for whatever the thing is, like something I'd probably just heard about, like a coaxial cable, like whatever it is that I just heard about. And in purchasing this thing, the individual that I was talking to would tell me about some other thing that existed there or how it worked. Like I just got to understand what I was buying in such a different way. Whereas today, it's probably like my son will probably be like, hey, can we get this thing to work? And I'll be like, yeah, sure. And I'll just go into Amazon and buy it myself. And like he almost has nothing to do with the transaction right now, let alone speaking to an expert, which is what they had back then, which might even be different now, even sometimes when you go into stores. They had experts that could describe to you how the technology worked. So I agree with your point.
This is exactly like today, I think you can be interested in something, stumble through YouTube video demos, you can kind of get there in the same way. But it was a stark contrast in a way that made me go, yeah. It didn't leave a positive Amazon taste in my mouth, but it is what it is. There are definitely benefits. All right.
So then you went on Amazon. You went on Amazon and bought a book for What If Things Were Different? No, I'm joking. Yeah.
100%. Put in my earbuds for my Audible book.
Yeah, exactly. Just to drown out your sorrows. All right, we're going to reach in the fishbowl for the last topic of the day before we get to Inside the Trade for premium listeners. This topic is venture fund returns. There were a couple blog posts that came out recently that were both about venture fund returns, one for Y Combinator companies and one for Collab Fund, that I thought were really interesting. And I think a reason that they came out is because, as we've talked about a few times over the last couple months, was that so much is coming out about like the venture arrogance score that we discussed, where is it possible for venture funds to still get enough money? Is private equity money so locked up? What's going on with public versus private? Like so much has been coming up about that. So I thought these two pieces were interesting, and I'm going to walk through them. There's some elements of this that are tough to get just via audio because there are tables and graphs and stuff, but we'll do our best to get the facts across to you. So first, I'm going to start off with the Y Combinator one. In this blog post, they cover the hypothetical situation. So because this could not exist, but they said hypothetically, if one had invested in every Y Combinator company since the first batch in 2005, what would that look like from a return perspective? And there are a few reasons why it's not possible. You don't have to know the specific reasons, but you can just imagine that it would be really hard to invest in every company, right, that came through anything. But I want to walk through what they came up with. And apparently, they have the best data set for what these returns could look like. So they can't calculate it exactly, but based on things like Crunchbase and information they have, they can get it probably directionally right with some margin of error. So here's the data. One, holy matrimony. So they looked at the return for each of the individual companies, and Airbnb, by a long shot, is the number one returning company. It's probably not wild in your minds, but it is. Seeing this stuff on a graph is crazy. Okay, so with Airbnb, they are, give or take, about 6,000 multiple on your money. Airbnb. Number 2
Can I
is
speculate as to
Stripe.
why? I mean, Airbnb was like, hey, there's a conference coming to town and we're going to rent out some couches. Like, I don't know what their initial valuation was, but I'd be like, yeah, that's worth $75. Now they're like, it's like booking.com and Airbnb.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, you're right. So there are a number of components to this. So one, Airbnb has become huge. So just like it's big no matter what. But with any multiple, to your point, a multiple has a numerator and a denominator. And you have to, like those two things matter. And if Airbnb had been started, let's imagine it had the same general trajectory, but the organization was started in 2020. And so they got their initial, like end of 2020, got their initial funding in 2021. That company would have come out the gate at like a $40 billion valuation.
Yeah,
or something like.
And if it had AI in the name, like, I mean,
yeah, exactly. Whereas where Airbnb was founded, sometime it was like 2008, 2009, 2010, like somewhere in that realm, which was still the time where for a seed stage or like especially at a YC level, which is pre-seed, really, I mean, you're getting like a $1 million valuation, like something wild like that. And so just the numerator and denominator there alone are kind of buck wild. So that is certainly one thing. But so it's Airbnb. I'll just name the top 5. Airbnb, Stripe, Dropbox, Instacart, DoorDash. All of them started around that time. So they not only have what you just mentioned, but they also have had a lot more time to mature. So there are a few reasons why. But the important point is here is just the order of magnitude difference. So Airbnb is a little over 6,000. If you go to company number like 10, roughly, it's at like 500x. So still pretty big, but just an order of magnitude difference. Where it starts to get really interesting is this. They calculated out what the average annual rate of return for if you invested in every YC company right through all the batches, average annual rate of return would be 176% per year since 2005.
And what am I going to say? The average is garbage.
Sorry. That's what I got. Like I don't know what else. I don't know what else to give you. They looked at this by batch. They looked at it in a few different ways, but they looked at this by batch, which is interesting. And as we just mentioned, so 2009 is when Stripe and Airbnb came through, and that batch is 2,500% average annual investor return for that batch. The next highest batch, which was 2007, is about 500%, which is ridiculous, right? But what I didn't see, I don't think they did this in here because I would have grabbed it if I'd seen it. They didn't say X 2009. What's the rest of it? It's obviously pretty high. Like, it's not like it's all based on that. But that 1 year with Stripe and Airbnb, like that 1 year is insane right there.
Well, and that happens everywhere. That's the perfect time. So you want the economy to be terrible. And that's why the initial valuations is way lower, which means the VCs get a much better deal. And if your business can start off and become successful in that time period, it's going to be more resilient long term. I'd love to own some Stripe, man. That's
yeah.
Great.
It's a whole thing. So there were a couple things high level that I took away from this. So one is what you've mentioned before to me separately and on the pod is just YC is in a different level. It's a different stratosphere than other, and you'll see that when we talk about Collab Fund here in a second, which is done very, very well. Collab Fund's done very, very well, and you'll see that YC is just a whole different level. So that's one thing that's a takeaway just looking at those numbers. The second thing is, just like in the public markets, it is such a select few amount of companies that make so much of the return up. If you take away, I don't have the numbers here, but I'm just doing directionally. If you take away YC's top 10, and they do many, many a year, I don't know what it is. Like it's now, I think it's like a couple hundred in each batch, or so. It's like something wild. I don't know the number, but something like that. It didn't start off that high. But if you take away their top 10, you probably cut the average annual return by like 80%. Or something like that. It gets probably pretty wild. Now,
of course,
you cut 180% by 80%, you still have a pretty good return. So like YC is still doing pretty solidly, but it's not quite that. So just like in the public markets, it's like such a small percent, you can't miss those organizations. That's pretty fascinating. So those are my big two takeaways. I loved seeing the numbers. That was my thing here. Thoughts, questions before we go into Cloudflare?
I mean, I'm not going to do it on the pod, but if someone wants to buy me coffee, I can explain why I think YC has an unfair competitive advantage.
Ooh, love it.
There's something there for sure.
Yeah. It's insane. That number is insane. Okay, let's go to Collab Fund. So Collab Fund put out, thank you for them for doing this. They put out a table that had everything from 2011 when they started to 2024, and by year, cumulatively, looked at a few of the metrics that are important for looking at what returns for shareholders are for VCs. And this is not something that funds typically do. Like even with the YC one, YC didn't put this out. This was someone else doing analysis. Collab Fund just put it out. And what they said, similar to how I started this part of it, they were like, there's so much recently that's coming out that's around what returns look like. Just look at ours. Because what's important is how it matures over time. They said what's being skipped here is a maturity curve of a fund. Like if you look at our fund in the second year, that's going to look very different from our fund in the 10th year. And so there's a variable that's being skipped. I'm going to define a couple things here. Okay. I'm going to define a couple things because they're part of this table just so folks can understand what they are. So there's something called distributions to paid in capital. In this table, if you're on the Substack on Monday, skippydoogles.substack.com, if you're on that on Monday, you'll be able to see the table. And I just want to define what's in the table here. So distributions to paid in capital, DPI is the acronym that's in there. That's how much cash investors have gotten back compared to what they put in. That's what that is. Then there's something called total value to paid in capital, TVPI. That's the value of the investment, so both realized and unrealized. So like the value of the portfolio before fees at a gross level and after fees at a net level. So there's the value versus actual distributions. Then there's multiple invested capital, which is more straightforward, and IRR, internal rate of return, which is like the average return you have. So that's what we're looking at. To give you a couple of the points, and there's an inflection point in here. So for Collab Fund, 2011 starts off, everything is who cares? Doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. Over the first 4 years when they got all their capital that came in, those first 4 years, they got about $8 million that came in that they then had to spend out. So we're going to skip those first 4 years because that's really when they're collecting, they're starting to put out. And now skip ahead. So at this point, we're at 2015. So 2015 distributions are now in their second year. There's a 0.2x DPI. Remember, that's distributions to paid in capital. It's how much they've paid out they paid out to investors versus what investors have put in. That's 0.2x. You go forward to 2024, that then becomes 4x. And I'm going to read between 2015 and 2024. I'm not going to name the years, just start naming chronologically year by year how that number changes. Starting in 2015. 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.9, 0.9, 3.8, 3.8, 4, and 4.1. So you can see from a distributions to the investor standpoint how that shifts and the importance of a couple things. One, the reason why they put this out, the maturity curve. The second thing is also the importance of patience in this stuff. And this comes back to my mentioning how private and public, also in the end, they're different. I'm not saying they're not different, but thematically, it's true. If someone put in their money in 2011, and then when they were able to, which I think is something usually, let's call it like 7 years or whatever. So 2018, they're like, I actually got to pull my funds out. They would have had a 0.6 return on the capital they put in, just looking at the average here. Okay. And at that point, their IRR would be 12%, this says. If they waited another 3 years, it goes to 3.8x, and you're sitting at a 22% IRR. It's so important, and it's hard to see when you're in the moment as an investor. We talk about long-term versus short-term all the time, and this is such a fascinating view on that, because a big difference in private versus public is your money is, I'll call it, it's just in a black box. Like you know what's going on with them, but there's no mark to market. Like you don't really know what it's worth, unlike, you check your portfolio on Monday. And so it's even more important in there. Right, I'll pause. I said a lot of numbers and a lot of words, so I'll pause and get your thoughts.
I'm going to summarize, say it slightly differently. So if you're investing in early stage companies, a successful investment turns into an exponential curve, but you start at the very beginning of that exponential curve.
That's right.
And so, of course, down the road, the difference between year 7 to year 10 to year 15, those outcomes in terms of returns are drastically different, right? This is why it's so hard, though, because very few people have a 15-year time horizon. The person that wants to write, I don't know, a $10 million check at age 35, there's not that many people there that can then wait around and actually get their money back at age 50 and go spend it. A lot of people at age 50 can write a bigger check, but then you get your money at 65 or 70. What good is it to you?
Yeah, who cares? Yeah.
I mean,
that's
people
right.
care. People care to brag about it with their friends. But like in terms of actually improving their quality of life, which is what I try and keep as an important piece of my core investing philosophy, it doesn't matter. It's a good point, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's good.
And it's the thing that one of the things that has really stuck with me that you've said a few times is around how human beings can't naturally or really even unnaturally understand what exponential means. Like, it's so hard for humans to get this, is that the natural way, whether folks will admit it or not, the natural way that a human would, even let's just take Airbnb. Let's say, I'm making up numbers here. Let's say Airbnb, you invest at the beginning, it's worth $0 for all intents and purposes. And at the end, Airbnb is worth $100 billion. Let's just say like that's what you're working with. The human being that you go, okay, so yeah, of course. So if you tell me I should wait 15 years, cool, I'll wait 15 years. And at the end, even if you told me it's going to be $100 billion, like if you told me the end, what I'm going to imagine is I'm going to go 100 billion divided by 15. Okay. So every year I'm looking at what is that, like a $7 billion, whatever, like $7 billion every year.
Close,
so even if after year 10, it's 70 billion. Okay, I can cash out that. Yeah, maybe I missed the last 30. But what it really could mean is in year 9, that thing could be worth $50 million. Like, because
in actuality, like 90%, like 90 billion might show up in year 15.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it just like takes off. It just takes off, right? Yeah, so it's really, really hard for humans. Whew. All right. You ready for Inside the Trade?
So excited about it. You're going to make fun of me. These are good picks, though, man. You just wait.
I am excited. I'm excited. I'm excited to make fun of you. I'm very excited about it. So thank you for all of our listeners. We appreciate you every week. And now we're going to go over to, for premium listeners, Inside the Trade. Everyone else, we'll see you next week.